Over the past few months, stories have been circulating about missing scientists that seem to have eerily similar circumstances, and many of them are connected to UFOs. Some of these seem to have rational explanations, while others truly are baffling and seem to fit the narrative of a typical government hit. Today we'll be looking at this list of missing scientists, seeing which ones have similarities, which ones don't, and introducing some new ones that haven't gotten into the public eye quite yet. The first thing to discuss is how this has all been coming out. It started with only 2 missing scientists, and then 3, and then 4, and has now gotten up to 12. I have 2 theories with that. As people started paying attention to this, they began to add people that don't fit into the suspicious timeline at all, or people that have very little reliable connection to UFOs in any way. My second theory is that it almost feels like the public, or someone else, established a narrative early on that UFO researchers are being taken out, and they've ran with it and tried to connect any dots that they could, leading to some things being connected that don't quite match up. The first scientist we will cover today is Amy Eskridge. Amy Eskridge was a 34-year-old woman living in Huntsville, Alabama, and was said to have committed suicide by a gunshot to the head in 2022. She was the daughter of Richard Eskridge, who was a retired NASA engineer that specialized in plasma infusion technology. They co-founded the Institute for Exotic Science, and what Amy said was in order to create a public-facing persona to disclose anti-gravity technology.
I started the Institute for one reason. I started it as a public-facing persona to disclose anti-gravity technology through, because I told Mark this. If you stick your neck out in public, at least someone notices if your head gets chopped off. If you stick your neck out in private, fuck you. They will bury you. They will burn down your house while you're sleeping in your bed, and it won't even make the news.
Amy had a bachelor's in chemistry and biology from the University of Alabama in Huntsville, which the college and city itself is known for its connection with engineering, physics, rockets, the military-industrial complex, and the Marshall Space Flight Center. Marshall is the 3rd NASA Space Flight Center. Kennedy Space Center handles the launch, Houston handles astronauts while they're out in space, and Huntsville handles the ISS. Marshall has led the development of the Space Launch System, which is the launch vehicle for the Artemis program. Amy mentioned the Redstone Arsenal would be the place for exotic propulsion to be produced, that it has been being produced, and that multiple engineers and scientists there had been coming up missing or dead.
Disclosure is going to come out of Huntsville, Alabama, out of Redstone Arsenal. Redstone Arsenal in Huntsville, Alabama is the biggest fucking deal that you've never heard of.
She mentioned her dad also worked there, where he was a chief engineer and later worked in advanced propulsion research programs. And she claimed he was the 5th person to have independently discovered anti-gravity. Their institute worked on anti-gravity and exotic propulsion concepts, and they delivered a presentation together describing historical and modern experiments related to gravity modifications, including black projects such as the TR-3B, which I have a previous video on. She was focused on disclosure of this technology and about extraterrestrial life, and claimed to be under serious amount of pressure because she had a plan in 2020 to disclose this info to the public and was awaiting NASA's approval. She gave a 3-hour interview in 2020 in which she mentioned she was under heavy surveillance. She mentioned a car that would continuously switch license plates and follow her where she went, to being followed around in bars, and even being drugged. She even claimed that she was the target of a direct energy weapon, and that she knew others that had been targeted by it as well.
My hands have been burned to hell and back as I've been typing. Because you can beam me through there and through there, and you can get a 3D image of what I'm typing. Because this computer doesn't have a Wi-Fi card, you can't hack it, but you can maybe get a 3D image of me typing. So like we just did that, and did that. As an act of pure desperation. And guess what? I feel better immediately. Like, my hands still burn because there's damage. But it's like my body relaxed when we barricaded the shit.
She partnered with retired British intelligence officer Frank Milburn to investigate. In texts that have now been released, Amy would tell Milburn how she was being targeted and how she was not suicidal in any way and didn't want it to be accepted if it ever came out that she committed suicide, which it did in 2022. Milburn submitted his findings to Congress in 2023 with his conclusion that she did not commit suicide, and there have never been any official investigations that have taken place. Now, all of this seems to be pretty convincing, but there are a few issues here. People close to Amy reported that towards the end she was experiencing what they would call delusions and being surveilled along with the target of a directed energy weapon that melted window blinds. While it might be true, definitely fits into that category. It also seemed like alcohol was a very big part of Amy's life. She said that her zone was at the bar, and in the 3-hour Zoom interview, she's drinking throughout, slurring words, and in the beginning says this.
Hey, that's fine too. We can just chat. Yeah. Dude, that's cool because that means I can get drunker.
And if we look back at the directed energy weapon video, we'll see a shot of Tito's on her desk along with a bottle of wine on the floor. Now, this could all just be because she was truly under immense pressure and it did drive her to seek out alcohol to help alleviate it. Her father also isn't very caught up on her death, stating, "Sometimes scientists die." Now, this could be that he didn't think there were any suspicious details, or it could be him just wanting it to go away. And Amy Eskridge isn't the only one with ties to Huntsville and UAH. Nina Lee was a physicist at UAH in the 1990s, working at the Center for Space Plasma and Aeronomic Research. She published papers proposing that rotating ions in a high-temperature superconductor could generate a gravitomagnetic field, potentially producing a repulsive force named anti-gravity. She later left UAH in 1999 to continue the research privately through her company AC Gravity, and even received a Department of Defense grant, further tying her work to advanced propulsion and the government.
What about the innovator who's afraid of disappearing?
That's a whole nother problem. I think doing it in the public is better in that case. But that's a different...
It still doesn't mean it won't disappear. Even if you do it in the public, it still don't mean that the inventor won't disappear for lots of reasons.
Like Ning Li.
The next missing scientist is General William Neal McCasland. General McCasland was 68 years old and was reported missing from his home in Albuquerque on February 27, 2026. He was with his wife that morning, and once she went to a doctor's appointment, where she was only gone for around 1 hour, he vanished. He had changed his clothes, left his phone, and any wearable devices with GPS tracking at home, and the only things missing were hiking boots and a revolver. McCasland was a retired U.S. Air Force Major General who held a significant amount of very high-level roles and would have had access to more classified information than probably anyone else. He had a PhD in astrophysics from MIT. He was the commander and ran the Air Force Research Lab at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, rumored to be where UFO materials were flown to after the Roswell crash in 1947. And he oversaw a $2.2 billion budget of science and technology. He was the director of space vehicles at Kirtland Air Force Base, which works on advanced propulsion and experimental technologies. He worked at the Office of Special Projects and later became the Pentagon Director of Special Programs, which would include having oversight of all special access programs in the government. This explains why two politicians popular in the UFO space, Tim Burchett and Eric Burleson, both had talked about his importance in the disclosure movement. Burchett said, "He's the guy that had a lot of nuclear secrets. I've been told by several sources that he was the gatekeeper for the UFO stuff." And Burleson mentioned McCasland has a lot of info on UFOs. Burleson said his office also tried talking to McCasland twice before his disappearance, and he was trying to investigate mysterious scientist disappearances for over a year before this became a big story. Also, in the WikiLeaks release of Hillary Clinton's emails, McCasland was confirmed to be connected to the UFO topic. Tom DeLonge, the former member of Blink-182 and the creator of To the Stars Academy, emailed John Podesta about McCasland, saying, "He says he's a skeptic. He's not. He only has to say that because of how much he knows." Tom said he gave him a 4-hour presentation on the topic of UFOs, and McCasland agreed to be on the board of To the Stars Academy, choosing to do this without a salary. Tom said not only did McCasland play a big role in the topic, but he also helped Tom assemble his advisory team, coordinating other highly connected individuals to be part of the public movement of UFO disclosure. McCasland's wife was the one to report him missing, and on the 911 call she mentioned she thinks he planned to not be found.
This is April. How may I help you?
Hi, April. My name is Susan Wilkerson. My husband is missing.
Okay.
And it's been about 3 hours, and I have some indication that he must have planned not to be found. He's left his phone. He changed his clothes into I don't know what. I left for a doctor's appointment at about 11:10, and he was here at that time at the house. And I got back from that at noon, and he was gone.
Has he been diagnosed with any mental disorders or anything like that?
Well, we've been seeing a doc for both physical and mental in terms of anxiety, short-term memory loss, lack of sleep. The same doc I went to see today.
And she was no slouch either. She also had a PhD in astrophysics, was an Air Force colonel, worked at both Boeing and Raytheon, and was a NASA astronaut semifinalist. She mentioned he had complained of cognition issues such as short-term memory loss, and this led to the Silver Alert being put out for him, which is for individuals 50 plus and considered to have some level of deteriorated cognition. She made a Facebook post about his disappearance, stating that he had been in contact with Tom in the past, but it had decreased after a Russian hack. Plus, she had accepted a Google Meet invite titled DeLong Podesta. This was an important detail because many people denied that McCasland and DeLong ever had any contact. She claimed that he had no special knowledge on any Roswell crash materials or alien bodies, and that since there was no sign of him, maybe the best hypothesis was that a mothership beamed him up. Jesse Michaels mentioned the same idea, but this is such a strange post from a wife with a missing husband to where it almost feels like it has some sort of other meaning, like she wants people to read between the lines. She had also claimed that after retiring from the Air Force, Neil was a man who was winding down. But when we look at what he was up to, he founded DBE Consulting, which was a New Mexico national security firm tied to James Tegnelia, the former deputy director of DARPA and the director of the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, both of which are known to be involved in many special access programs related to exotic technologies. He also was part of the board of trustees at Riverside Research and the director of technology at ATA, Applied Technology Associates, so he had a lot going on to be winding down. Authorities mentioned they have cameras on both ends of his street and still were unable to see him going in either direction. Within 1 week, the search had expanded from the sheriff's office to the local FBI office, to the Air Force's Special Investigations, to the New Mexico Search and Rescue, including search horses, 3 different dogs, helicopters, and drones. And despite being an avid, experienced hiker, no sign of him has ever been found other than a sweatshirt that could never be confirmed to be his. And there's still been no update on his disappearance despite it being over 2 months ago. But his case has been connected to multiple other missing scientists that will be discussed, such as Stephen Garcia, Anthony Chavez, Melissa Casias, and Monica Reza. Monica Jacinto Reza was a 60-year-old woman who was last seen on foot June 22, 2025. She was an aerospace engineer working in advanced propulsion programs and the director of NASA Jet Propulsion Lab Materials. She received NASA funding and created a new alloy, Mondalloy, which was a patented nickel-based superalloy that was able to withstand extreme temperature and pressure while being able to bend and return to its original shape, fitting the description of the Roswell crash materials.
But the thing about that got me is that you couldn't even bend it, you couldn't dead it. Even with a sledgehammer would bounce off of it.
And this is how she became connected to McCasland. He oversaw the Air Force group that funded research in advanced materials just like hers, and she worked under him on a government-funded aerospace project. She disappeared in June 2025, 8 months before McCasland, while on a hike with 2 friends that they said they did every week. Just like McCasland, she was also known as an avid hiker and was last seen about 30 feet behind our friends, smiling and waving, and then was never seen again. Volunteers and authorities searched the area for months using large groups of people, helicopters, radars, and dogs. No trace at all has been found, and with McCasland disappearing in a similar fashion, it rejuvenated the search and people began to connect the dots. Stephen Garcia is another scientist that has been connected to both Reza and McCasland. Garcia was last seen August 28, 2025, 2 months after Reza disappeared and 6 months before McCasland in an eerily similar way. He was last seen on foot leaving his Albuquerque home, leaving his phone and keys behind and carrying a handgun. Local authorities assumed he was a danger to himself since he had a gun, but Garcia was an extroverted person with lots of friends who said he was mentally stable and had no suicidal ideations. His personal and work computers, emails, and files all resulted in no clues into where he went or why he left. So another scientist disappears on foot, leaving all trackable items behind and taking only one item that seems to write a clear narrative. Garcia worked in nuclear components research and was tied to classified defense infrastructure. He was a government contractor at the Kansas City National Security Campus facility in Albuquerque, New Mexico, which manufactures over 80% of non-nuclear components of U.S. nuclear weapons. He worked as a property custodian, meaning he was responsible for tracking and controlling government-owned equipment and materials. He oversaw tens of millions of dollars of assets and equipment and was reportedly known to have a high level of oversight at the facility. These next two missing scientists both worked at Los Alamos National Laboratory in New Mexico, which is the same place Bob Lazar claimed to have worked on reverse engineering a UFO. First is Anthony Chavez, a 79-year-old who worked at Los Alamos for decades and was last seen in May 2025. Matching multiple other disappearances we've mentioned so far, he left on foot, leaving keys and wallet behind, and he had no phone. His family mentioned it was out of character for him to go somewhere without people knowing. He also was a smoker, but left his cigarettes behind, which has been pointed out to be odd since that would be as natural as taking your wallet somewhere. There's been no other updates on his disappearance at all. Melissa Casias went missing in June 2025, just 1 month after Chavez, and also worked at Los Alamos. She was 53 years old and was known to be part of administrative staff, so not necessarily a scientific role. Melissa had a daughter named Sierra and a husband named Mark that also worked at Los Alamos. Her normal day would be driving both of them to work, and on the day she went missing, it started out just like any other normal day. She dropped Mark off at his facility, and he saw her hand her badge over to security to be let in. Shortly after, she emailed her work that something came up with her daughter and that she needed to return home and would be in late that day. Once she got home, she saw Melissa and told her that she had forgotten her badge for work, but remember, her husband saw her swipe it. She offered to make Sierra breakfast, which confused her daughter since she thought she needed to get back to work, but Melissa told her that she might just stay home all day. The final contact Mark had with Melissa was through their daughter Sierra at 11 a.m. Mark wasn't able to get in touch with Melissa and had Sierra ask if he needed to find a ride home, to which Melissa said yes. Sierra goes to work and around 2:30 p.m., text to Melissa suddenly stopped going through. Sierra left work early to check on her mom and saw that despite her car still being home, the doors were locked and Melissa had left her keys and phones inside. No spare keys were missing, and it was later discovered that both of her personal phones and her work phone were all factory reset. Upon further investigations, the police did uncover that Melissa and Mark were undergoing financial struggles, with her owing the IRS taxes, them having separate bank accounts, and her being in charge of all of the bills, and having performance issues at work. She was last seen at her home, and then just vanished. No signs of forced entry, no cameras picked her up leaving her house, and no clues of her whereabouts. Now this is the part of the video that I want to make clear that these next few don't seem to be as tied to McCasland as the previous ones did. The last few have all either been explicitly into anti-gravity, worked underneath McCasland, or been connected to top bases known to work on this technology that McCasland would have had oversight on. These next two, Carl Grillmair and Nuno Louriero were true scientists that were shot and killed. Carl Grillmair was 67 years old and a world-renowned astronomy researcher, known for his work in discovering water in exoplanet atmospheres and mapping the Milky Way galaxy. He received multiple NASA awards, including the NASA Exceptional Scientific Achievement Medal in 2011. He was known to be very passionate about his work, to the extent of living in a secluded area to have minimal light pollution for the observatory he built at his home. Despite living in a remote area, on December 20th, 2025, he called 911 about a trespasser carrying a rifle on his property. The rifle was armed and unregistered, leading to a felony charge for the suspect, Freddie Snyder. Once arrested, Freddie said he was just going to the post office and he was carrying the gun for protection from animals, but cops uncovered that the post office was in the opposite direction and took him to jail, where he was accused of trying to escape the next day. Other neighbors reported Snyder's behavior, saying he had broken into their home on December 28th, just 1 week after his encounter with Carl. Snyder also lived only 2 miles from Carl. The California judge let him off the hook due to no prior criminal history and required him to take a gun safety course. By February 5th, the charges had been dropped. 2 weeks later, he shot and killed Carl on his front porch. Snyder was arrested hours later when he threatened and attempted to carjack his own mother. While Carl doesn't have any connection to classified information or UFOs, people connect him to the other scientists based off the fact that he was murdered, and it seemed like someone was specifically set on getting him, along with the perpetrator being easily let off the hook. Nuno Louriero was a 47-year-old father of 3 who was killed at his home in December 2025. The same month, Carl first encountered Freddie. Nuno joined MIT in 2016 and was appointed the deputy director of the Plasma Science and Fusion Center in 2022, and then promoted to the director in 2024. He was a plasma and physics researcher, focusing on advanced energy and fusion research, often linked to exotic propulsion. Nuclear fusion is theorized to be a highly clean energy that would essentially harness the power of the sun and power our entire society. It would get rid of all other forms of energy and their industries, and Nuno was the director at one of the top research labs on the planet, researching it. He had been nominated by Joe Biden for the Presidential Early Career Award for Scientists and Engineers, which the White House describes as the highest honor bestowed by the U.S. government on outstanding scientists and engineers early in their careers. Initially, there were no suspects of who shot Nuno. Reports came out of a gray sedan without headlights and conflicting reports of a blue or black sedan. But just 3 days before Nuno was shot, there was a mass shooting at Brown University. Now, this may sound unrelated, but wait until you hear all of the details. The Brown shooter was identified as Claudio Valente, who killed 2 students and injured 9 others. He studied physics in the 1990s in Portugal at the same university as Nuno. Claudio was tied for top of the class, while Nuno was considered an average student. Claudio was set on going to MIT, but didn't perform well on grad school admission exams, and instead ended up at Brown University, where he was disappointed with the lack of academic rigor, stating that he was being taught info he learned in undergrad. At Brown, Claudio's classmates said he was combative and egotistical, and he took a leave of absence and eventually discontinued the program. Claudio was also linked to a blue sedan. He rented it and was seen in it multiple times leading up to the mass shooting at the university and Nuno's. His classmates said he seemed to harness a lot of resentment, and the Justice Department released transcripts of video recordings that Claudio made in which he confessed to committing both of these crimes but didn't give a motive. Nuno is typically included in the list of these scientists because, just like Carl Grillmair, it seemed like someone had a direct motive to complete a hit on him and was getting away with crimes beforehand. But unlike Carl, Nuno does have more of a connection to exotic materials, since he led a top research lab on progressing plasma physics. With these 2 scientists being murdered, people began looking for other connections. Albeit weak connections, people did connect Frank Maiwaild and Michael Davis Hicks. Frank was a jet propulsion lab engineer at NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab, where he managed space instrumentation projects. He passed in July 2024 at 61 years old with no real suspicious details, and is typically only linked because he's a NASA scientist. Michael Davis Hicks was a planetary scientist working on technology related to planetary defense from asteroids. He worked on the Near Asteroid Tracking Project, and essentially, he worked on projects that would prevent a massive asteroid colliding with Earth. He was also a NASA scientist and died in 2023 with no suspicious details. Now with all of this information, let's recap. People often mention 12 missing UFO scientists, but through this video we know that not all are actually connected to UFOs, and not all were scientists. Despite this, there are different connections that are made, whether it's being connected to a top secret base known to have exotic technologies, NASA connections, or being linked to the next stage of advanced propulsion in aircraft, or just being connected to General McCasland. The House Oversight Committee has sent letters to multiple agencies including the FBI, the Department of Energy, the Department of War, NASA, and more requesting information about the scientists and other personnel linked to nuclear and space technology secrets that have mysteriously died or vanished in recent years. Despite not everything being a clear connection, it truly does look like something very weird is going on. Some of America's top scientists are being killed or going missing. Whether this is a foreign government behind this, or that they may be getting called to something more important by the US government, for many of these, we may never know. And unfortunately, this list will likely continue to grow, as either more people come up missing, or commit suicide.
What it's going to take is, it's going to take a scientist or somebody that's going to have to walk out of one of those dadgum labs before they're allowed to commit suicide by shooting themselves in the back of the head 10 times.